Yeah.
Our organization is one that on a daily basis supports whatever you want to call it, the free market system of economic choice. It was disturbing to me, and I think to our organization, when the National Education Association looked at a resolution, I believe it passed one of their committees, that called the free market system one of oppression, but didn't call out other totalitarian regimes. So what does it say when our educators don't seem to believe in the free market system?
Well, I mean, obviously, I love this question. So I
would
say that the National Education Association is a very far-left group, and so it's not a particular surprise that they're characterizing freedom of the market in that particular way. It also goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about what sort of control parents should have over the education of their own children. There's a reason I send my kids to private school. The notion that
the reason it's on a private school is because you're rich. That's the reason, Ben. Like, let's be fucking candid here if we can. I sent my kids to a private school. I'm like, yeah, you know how expensive private school is, Ben? Most people can't afford that, Ben. No, who can? Ben? People who have the same thoughts as people who are laughing and clapping in a chamber of commerce along with you, bro. You might as well just get in a big-ass 200-person, I don't know how many people are there, jam band. Like, goddamn, dude, you're all just circle jerks. Like a punk band. Jesus.
Capitalism is a system of unfreedom. Well, government, largesse, is a system of freedom, ignores the fact that somebody actually has to pay the bills. It also ignores the fact that all growth, not some, all growth that has ever happened is a result of capitalism. Meaning it is the result of free market transactions in which people consent to services and goods from other people, in which people innovate and make new products. There's a reason we're not still riding horses and buggies around. That is because of innovation. It's because of incentive structures. It's because people get to keep the fruit of their own labor and then use those fruits of their own labor in order to invest in things. The true growth in the American economy was never just a question of dollars and cents. It was what you got for those dollars and cents. All of
good
that
Radiohead song.
Entrepreneurs who are willing to take risk. And when you disincentivize risk, you end up disincentivizing people from taking those risks. As we become a much more wage-based society, and that has happened for a large segment of the population, that means that you are incentivizing people to not take those risks. And countries that don't have people taking those risks end up being countries that economically stagnate.
Yeah.
Well, that was a abrupt commercial. Yeah.
So,
no, she's like, yeah, fuck, you're dumb.
Those are the ideas that actually, funny enough, have been repeated over and over again in our education system. The idea that, you know, children or students in this country are taught that capitalism is evil is new to me, because I certainly did not get that type of education. Quite the opposite, in fact. You know, freedom is an interesting way of framing it, because the fact of the matter is, if you are financially stable, if you are, you know, in the top 10% of this country, for instance, you probably feel incredibly free. You have options, endless options available to you. You probably have a nice nest egg. You have a little bit of that economic freedom. But, you know, there are two different things at play.
She's called a mustang?
Well, when you look at what is incentivized under capitalism, it's actually led to a lot of our own civil liberties being violated. For instance, data collection that takes place on a regular basis without our own knowledge by these social media.
Dude, everyone's sitting there. Oh my god.
Make their money.
That picture was telling. Everyone's sitting there is at like a fucking rich ass table. Like, these people probably paid like God knows how much a ticket to even be there. God damn. Chamber of Commerce, ladies and gentlemen. But they know the sufferings of the average worker.
Not off of advertising, for instance. They make the majority of their money off of selling our personal information to data brokers. It's part of the reason why there are infinite websites right now, so-called data brokers, that just sell our personal information, including where we live, what our phone number is, where we've worked. I don't really feel very free when I'm terrified about my own safety, because there's a, you know, company that's literally making money off of selling my personal information. So there are certain incentives under capitalism that actually do infringe upon our civil liberties and our rights. So that's one thing that I want to note. But the other thing I want to note is, how free do you feel if you're on the precipice of financial ruin, if you can't afford paying for a medical emergency that you're experiencing? What do you do when you don't have health insurance, which tens of millions of Americans right now don't have?
Yeah, boy, I ain't got no damn insurance
Associated with it. How free do you feel if you're a wage worker who has not experienced your real wages increase in literally decades. Wages have not kept up with inflation.
No.
So
The
how
last-
do you feel when you want to leave your job?
They definitely have it. The last wage increase is still not good enough. Like, we still need a wage increase. And it's not, everyone's like, oh, well, inflation, just drop or makes inflation happen. Like, no, inflation, it's a natural occurring. No matter what, we could have got paid less money and inflation still would have fucking occurred regardless. So it's like a complete moot point. In times where minimum wage is stagnant, inflation still happens. It's provable points. Go look up the information. It's there.
But you can't because your healthcare benefits are tied to that work or tied to that job. I mean, freedom, again, is an interesting way of framing it because I would venture to say that there's a significant portion of the population in the United States,
Holy
significant
shit.
portion of workers in this country that do not, in fact, feel free. In fact, have experienced the precarious nature of a capitalistic system that forces them to work endlessly, if they're lucky, in a full-time job, if they're unlucky, in several part-time jobs that they cobble together with no benefits just to make ends meet.
Look, I'll give you 30 seconds because I want to move on something with that.
Ooh, see, there was a few claps. They were like,
often played with the word freedom. Freedom obviously has two separate meanings. Isaiah Berlin talked extensively about negative liberty. What you're talking about are things that people need and things that people want, and that is not the same thing as liberty.
I'm talking about what people need. People need health care.
I agree that people need health care, but to characterize that as a freedom is a very different thing. If
people need healthcare, but to justify as a people need healthcare, but to justify as a need is wait, what? I gotta rewind that just a little bit.
Very often played with the word freedom. Freedom obviously has two separate meanings.
What did he say again?
Extensively about the difference between positive liberty and negative liberty. What you're talking about are things that people need and things that people want, and that is not the same thing as liberty.
I'm talking about what people need. People need health care.
I don't disagree that people need health care, but to characterize that as a freedom is a very
okay. Yeah. People need health care, but it's not a freedom. But they need it. Usually, things that you need are like connected to some sort of freedom. Like you need food, a safety net for that. Shelter, safety net for that. But I guess not healthcare. We learned something today from Ben Shapiro.
Different thing. If the goal of the government is to provide you the opportunity to seek things, right? Then that is not the same thing as the government providing those things to you directly. Nor is it the same thing as the government seizing that thing from one person and giving it to you here. To characterize it as freedom is a real mischaracterization. Again, I'm happy to discuss whether or not we should change the programming here, but I think that the sleight of hand that's played by equating freedom of speech, for example, or freedom from being murdered on the street, or freedom to dispose of your capital as you see fit, to characterize that in the same language that we'd use to discuss why you need a house. It's a difference in kind. It's apples and oranges.
Yeah. So let me just quickly.
Oh yeah, freedom, freedom and needs, freedom and needs. You know, apples and oranges. They aren't connected at all. They're not connected at all. Not one bit. Freedom and needs. Remember that. Freedom and needs. I think that's the worst point he's made all debate probably.
Idea of taking something from one person and giving
that's
it to the
fucking
redistribution
wildly stupid.
issue, which I think oftentimes is framed inaccurately. You know, when we talk about redistribution of wealth, I mean, look at the amount of money that gets invested by our federal government in the form of research and development, whether we're talking about pharmaceutical companies or even companies like Tesla. The seed money from Tesla did not come from private investors. In fact, the same year that Obama's administration invested in the failed Solyndra project, they also invested the same amount into Tesla. And guess what? Tesla ended up being a massive success. The only downside to it, though, is that now you have Elon Musk who's whining and crying about having to pay his fair share of taxes when during the pandemic,
threatening to move different state.
Period of time, the richest man literally in the world, right? So
Sorry, I'm gonna do a dab off cam.
So
libertarianism.
So look,
libertarianism.
Investments need to be made. That research and development needs to take place because private investors are not willing to take the risks necessary. It's true.
That is fundamentally untrue.
The federal government's research and development is what led to the internet. I mean, it's a huge part of it.
The fact that the government is a grab bag of cash does mean that the government will eventually invest in some things that are worthwhile. It will also invest in an awful lot of enormous piles of crap,
Okay,
right? The fact is, if you don't bear the risk of the downside, you're going to make a lot of bad investments.
We got a few more questions, and I want to get through, and we've got 4.5 minutes.
Nah, the crowd wasn't buying that one too much.
Comment about it.
The crowd didn't like that one as much. They were like, some were laughing, some were thinking about clapping, but literally they're kind of like, what? It's like you gotta, but because they know that you have to invest in order to gain anything. You got investment in people, investment in ideas is where you make your money. That's why they're like, you don't know.
Education.
They weren't sold too much on that one.
Elsewhere. We are an organization that firmly believes in education choice, and we've got a lot of kids in this state and others that are sentenced to underperforming schools solely by virtue of their zip code. Mm-hmm. We tell families in this Commonwealth, that's your school. We would never tell them that's your supermarket, that's your doctor, that's your dentist, you get to choose. Because, and a lot of that, to be blunt, is because of the collective bargaining agreements with tenured teachers and how much you pay. Can we really get to educational choice? Because a lot of these parents can't afford to send their kids somewhere else. Can we really get to that real education choice given the current state of collective bargaining in this Commonwealth and in this country to a large degree?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to say something that's incredibly unpopular with this group, and that's totally fine. The best education in the world currently takes place in Finland. They have the top education model, and they have completely banned private education. I would do the same.
Okay, so first of all, Finland is not the United States, and there's a frequent attempt. It does happen a lot where people will take something that has worked in Sweden or something that's worked in Norway or something that's worked in Finland. They'll say, what if we just take that, import it here, and it'll work exactly the same way? And it typically does not work. The fact is that Finnish Americans make more money in the United States than they do in Finland, for example. They have longer life expectancies in the United States than they do in Finland. It's true of Swedish Americans, it's true of Nordic Americans.
Life expectancy in Finland is much higher than the United States.
No, you're correct. Hold on.
It's only 78 years.
No,
which is, by the way, comparable to Cuba. 78 years.
Hold on a second. You're correct. The life expectancy in Finland is longer than the life expectancy in the United States. That's not what I said. I said the life expectancy for Finnish Americans is longer in the United States. That is an apples-to-apples comparison as opposed to completely different populations, and that's kind of my point. Okay, the fact is that the United States has
both those are terrible. Both those are terrible.
The population encompasses an enormous number of people who have very different beliefs about how education ought to be done. To suggest that
this is fucking stupid. His argument, I don't care about if it's apples, oranges, the fucking kumquats, dude. Your arguments, like both of those arguments, either way you present them, are dumb, non-factual, anecdotal at best.
Any national standard of education is going to not only please all of those people, but prove to be successful in such a wide variety of circumstances for some 330 million people. We've tried this with a radically increasing federal education budget over the course of the last 30 years, and what we've got is failing public schools all over the United States, except in specific local areas where there have been attempts to take back control locally. I'd love to see more localization, and frankly, I'm quite pleased that if COVID had one decent effect, it was more people taking their kids out of the public schools.
Okay.
That only leaves it up to either going to private schools, which they can't afford, or them teaching them themselves, which most parents are not adequately equipped or even trained in the way of teaching educationally like that. That's why you go to school to teach as a teacher. But no, more kids out of public school. It's a higher ignorance rate in America, higher uneducation rate. People like him want people uneducated, so they go work in his big businesses so he can fucking, crack that whip on you and you won't have any questions to ask. You'll be a dumb worker man. I'm dumb worker man now. Fucking dumb motherfucker.
We got 2 minutes, and so before I get in trouble, so let's go real quick. And this might not be a quick one, but so we've had this discussion in this country, and a member of Congress has called for, and many others have, universal basic income. And her comment was, we should institute a basic universal income for those unwilling to work. Would that be supported in this country?
Would that be supported?
Yeah.
I think on a broad level, the answer is no. Although I think that as time goes on and people become more dependent on government, then the answer is probably getting closer to yes.
You fucking dumb fuck.
Absolutely.
You're part of the reason why.
Why the government should be incentivizing people who don't want to work and have no excuse not to work.
Yeah, real great.
I mean, look, this is an opinion. I have a different view of humanity, and I think most people want to live lives with purpose. So I think most people do, in fact, want to work. I mean, for me, universal basic income is not the end-all, be-all of dealing with the economic issues that people are having. I know
it's a good
there's
step.
been a lot of focus on that because of Andrew Yang and his presidential run and his, demand that people get at least $1,000 a month. I don't think that that's going to solve the issues. I think that we have deeper problems that we need to deal with, and just throwing money at something in the form of a universal basic income is not going to solve that issue.
Right.
But
It's more
we
piecemeal.
decide, okay, maybe we're going to experiment with this on top of providing a much more robust social safety net. Then maybe we're having a conversation. But to me, the issue of UBI is less interesting.
Okay, final question. We're almost out of time. I can't go over too long because then I get the hook. We've talked a lot about where we're going and a lot of pessimism and a lot of concerns. What gives you hope right now?
What gives me hope is the younger generation and just how fired up they are about experimenting with different solutions. Finally, we have a generation that's looking at what's being done in other countries, what's working, what isn't working. We're now seeing more worker co-ops being developed. In fact, there are as many as 1,000 worker co-ops in this country. About 500 of them are in the startup phase. But that is exciting news because now we're seeing companies being formed with workers actually owning the means of production.
That's
We're not
dope.
talking
That's
about,
really dope.
The federal government owning the means of production. We're talking about actual workers making decisions democratically within the workplace. I think that's the right way to go about it. I love that it's being experimented with among younger workers, and I think that's the right way to go.
Ben, what gives you hope?
I like it.
What gives me hope is the fact that because this is such a diverse country and because what we are actually watching in real time is one of the great sorting features that we've seen in American public life in quite a while, right? We're seeing people like me move to Florida. We're seeing people who are in blue states want to stay in blue states. And what that's going to lead to is more diversity in terms of the attempted policies. And that in turn, I would hope, would lead to a couple of things. One, better empirical evidence as to what works and what doesn't. And two, I would really hope that it would lead people to look at the federal government and say, this is just something that cannot control the entire country at once with one giant rubric of rules. We have to let California be California, and we have to let Texas be Texas, and we have to let Florida be Florida. And if we can't agree to do that, when we are going to be locked in a never-ending battle for supremacy, and things are going to get very, very, very ugly before this is over. I think
Oh my God.
The great threat to the country
Some
right
violence
now
threat
is the
there.
widely held belief that the solution
That is like a very loosely veiled violence threat there. My God, my sir, calm down. You gonna be at the next riots? Jesus Christ. This guy's like, well, we're gonna fucking take the streets if those rich people can't stay rich. Jesus. Whew, calm down.
is not at the local
Asshole.
level, it's not at the state level, it is all at the federal level. And what we ought to be arguing about each and every day is how much money and what sort of regulations we ought to pursue for 330 million people. The longer that continues, the more we're going to decide we don't actually want to be part of that body politic, that the rewards of being part of that body politic are not worth the risk of people you oppose.
Bollywood.
Control of that giant gun that is the government and pointing it at you. So I'm really hoping that some form of subsidiarity is going to return, and that there will be some governmental figures who are willing to sort of reestablish the checks and balances and localism that were the hallmark of the Republic at the beginning and should be the hallmark of it again.
Look, I've enjoyed this conversation.
Very good, very good. Not him, but good.
Please.